Hello everyone, how you guys doing? Hopefully you guys are having a wonderful day, and today we're here with another episode of Runescape Rankings. This episode is going to be based around bosses and how I would rank them in old school RuneScape. There's a few factors I'll be taking into account with them. I'm someone that's done a lot of bossing, really do enjoy PVMing both on this account and other accounts that I've made. A lot of bossing overall. So for the most part, I have camped every single one of these bosses to some extent. There are 3 newer ones that I haven't really tried, so I can only speak as to how I view them, like through YouTube videos, Twitch. You know, I've seen them happen, I've seen kills happen, just might not have been there. So for the most part, I think I'm kind of a vet of bossing, but yeah, this is obviously going to be a pretty subjective list as far as what my favorite bosses are in the game. As far as how I'll be rating the bosses, there are 3 main factors I'm going to consider. The first one is the boss fight enjoyability, how much the first few times I went to the boss, how much I enjoyed its mechanics, how it played, and just the overall enjoyment of the fight. The second one is GP per hour. That's pretty important when bossing, because obviously you want to be making a little bit of money, ideally, unless you're like a pet hunter per se. And then number 3 is campability, which is kind of a mix of both. It's just how inclined I am to kill it for thousands of kills, you know. Some bosses you choose to do that on, and some, for a reason or another, you might not. So I think all 3 of those combined give me a pretty good idea of what bosses I like. And before we get into the rankings, as far as GP per hour goes, it's going to be relative towards where I think you should be in the game. So Wintertop may be higher than various other bosses that are way more GP an hour, but Wintertop you can do very early on, while with other bosses you can't do them sometimes until the late game. So it's all a sliding scale of where you should be when you're doing these bosses, so please keep that in mind. And so as far as listing the bosses, we are going to go from the F tier bosses to the A tier bosses. They're not listed in the exact order of cumulative score because, like I'm saying earlier, there's a lot of subjectiveness to this. Some bosses that are in B tier I think might deserve to be even higher or lower, and I'm kind of placing some bosses based off of where I think they truly are, not where I think they are. So, the rankings might not match up exactly the same, but I think tier-wise, this is a great list. So we'll start with F-tier bosses, the first one being the Grotesque Guardians. As far as boss fight enjoyability, I think this is a 7. Whenever it came out, I was actually pretty excited by my first 30-35 kills. Now that the GP an hour isn't that great, it's not that fun. So GP per hour, honestly, I gave it a 0 because like killing gargoyles is almost the same GP an hour, which is disgusting. As far as campability, I mean, if I'm not making any money in the boss fight, I mean, it's cool, but after a while, it's just a really long and tedious fight. I don't know. I'm not big on it, so I gave it a 2. For that. As far as Scorpia, this is one that I honestly steer clear from for the most part. It's in quite a heavily PK'd spot. The boss fight itself isn't too bad. I gave that a 4. I mean, it's nothing great by no means. And the GP per hour here is pretty bad, getting a 2. And campability, I mean, if it's not that great of a boss fight and I'm not getting good GP per hour and I'm in the wilderness, I just don't think that's a good boss to camp. So I gave it a 0. Moving on to Vedion, another heavily PK'd spot. That's the only reason it's in F tier, is because I like the fight. I mean, it's not that bad. If you're safe spotting it, I think the safe spot's way more enjoyable than regularly killing it, but still put it at a 3. GP per hour isn't that bad. I'll give it a 5. I mean, in theory, could be good, and does have a better drop table than some other, or most other, wildy bosses. However, the campability here is, again, a 0. I mean, this is... I've barely ever done like 2 trips at Vedion without dying, and you can't one-click teleport away. You're in level 31 wilderness or higher at all times, so, and it's a multi-spot. It's just awful. I die there all the time. I don't go there now. Moving on to D tier, we have some bosses that I would deem, doable, and what I want to, maybe not, but give them a peek every now and then. First one being Chaos Ellie, another wildy boss. As far as the boss fight enjoyability, I gave this a 3. I think it's pretty annoying, but again, it's a boss fight that you can safe spot, so depending on how you go about it, the actual killing of it, if you're doing it the normal way, is awful if you don't know how to do it right. But if done right, Chaos Ellie isn't that bad. GP per hour here, probably a 2. I mean, if you're coming here at high levels, of course it's not great, but if you're coming here at a low level, that chance of a D pick is kind of alluring. And then campability, just because the pet is at such a low rate and it's pretty easy to safe spot, I give that a 7. I just think people are going to be inclined to come here and kill it for a while because of that pet. So moving on to free-to-play bosses, I just clumped them both into the same group. And I mean, honestly, it's kind of hard to rank because this is just in a separate tier of its own, essentially. I gave the boss fight enjoyability a 5. I mean, for free-to-play people, I'm sure they enjoy it a lot. For members people, it's probably nothing special, so just smack dab in the middle there. GP per hour, I gave it a 1. Obviously, you know, it's some of the better drops that you can get in free-to-play, but the fact that you have to kill so many things for keys before that, it's not good GP an hour. It may work out a little better when you just break down the boss fights alone, but overall, not that great. And then the campability, I'll throw it at a 3. I mean, I think people in free-to-play are just looking for something to kill, so if they're moderately inclined, they might just camp it anyways, so I get that. I get that there's not a lot going on, and might want to give it a go. Next up in the D tier is Calfight Queen. This boss is really going to be a lot different whenever death mechanics change. I did the suicide method, which is where you fill up a looting bag in your inventory full of food and prayer potions and all that, and you go die with essentially 2 inventories of, you know, stuff. Then you come back with another inventory and you got 3 inventories. That is a decently enjoyable way to kill KQ because you can actually get, you know, many kills a trip, not just 1 or 2. If done in the normal way, I absolutely despise KQ. So boss fight enjoyability is a 4, but that's heavily dependent on how you do it and how you can do it. GP per hour is pretty trash even with the updated drop table, so I'll put that as a 2 because I think most people coming here are pretty high level. And campability also a 2. Not even really viable in my opinion without either the suicide method or the elite desert diary. And then the final D tier boss is Zammy. You know, God Wars dungeon bosses are a bit weird to me. I'm not hugely inclined to go there because their GP per hour is decent, but sometimes you need teams or you need to really have a sweaty solo method. And that's where Zammy is at. Zammy, in my opinion, is the worst God Wars dungeon boss because you can just get ran out of there so quickly, and the drops aren't overwhelming enough to where I'd want to just consistently farm keys or farm Zammy kills to get back in there. It's just tough. Now we're moving into C tier. These are bosses that obviously I moderately enjoy. Might do them every now and then, but not something I'm going to camp every time I get the opportunity. First one is Thermy, or the Thermonuclear Smoke Devil. This boss fight enjoyability, I'll put it at about a 6. It's a bit repetitive, although I mean most things in this game are, but the method I use, you teleport to your house, you come back, and you're just kind of running almost like agility laps with boss kills mixed in. It's a bit strange, so it can be different if you're looking for that. The GP per hour, I mean, it's not great. You're getting Slayer XP while you're doing it, so you could look at it like that, but I'll put it at 3.5. I mean, it's not low, but it's not even, I wouldn't put it at the med level of money making at that point of Slayer. And campability, I'll say is a 6. It's a pretty easy boss to camp, and if you're looking for the pet or something long term, I could see you doing it. If you aren't inclined for the pet, or you just don't want the Slayer task in general, then you could just downgrade and go burst the task instead if you like. Next up is Hespori. This boss fight, I mean, for like a low to mid level, I think it's fun. I'll give it a 7. It might not be more fun than some of the high level stuff, but at that range, I get it. I like it a decent bit. And the GP per hour is really low. I mean, I gave it a 2. I guess at really low levels it might mean something, but at this point the table is pretty tough, and it's just nice for farming XP, a pet chance, and you know, whatever other little stuff you'll get. Campability of 5, you know, you can mix it in with your runs as you see fit. Next up we have Skatizo, a boss fight that I really do enjoy. I think Skatizo's quite a fun boss overall. GP per hour, I mean, it's quite a weird one in the sense that you probably aren't killing this for an hour straight. You'll kill it, you know, for a few minutes every now and then, but it's okay. I'll give it a 5. And campability, obviously you can't camp it as I was saying, but if you had enough, I wouldn't mind killing 20 or 30 Skatizo, but that's not a ton, so I don't know. I gave it a 5 because I really don't have a good gauge of camping Skatizo, but couldn't imagine it'd be too bad. Then we have my highest KC boss overall, and that is Giant Mole. I've been hunting that pet, still don't have it, but overall I do enjoy the boss fight. Just kind of keeps you active and running around and keep you guessing. GP per hour isn't that great. I mean, really at any level of Mole, if you have a T-bow, if you just got the hard diary, I mean, wherever you're at on the scale, there's always better money-making methods, so I never really recommend Mole. But the campability is a 7. I decently enjoy the boss, and it's okay GP, so I've killed a ton of it, and I really want that pet. So yeah, maybe higher on my personal list, but I will put it in C tier. Then next up, we have the first boss that I really haven't killed any of. I've seen people kill it. I understand what it's meant for, and that is Sarachnis. It looks pretty enjoyable to kill. I mean, as far as like a low to mid level boss, somewhere in there. Gets you kind of introduced to some mechanics of bossing, and also the GP per hour isn't too bad, throwing that in there at a 6. And the campability overall, I mean, I don't recommend really anyone camp low to mid level bosses for too long because you're kind of stalling the progress in your account. So I'll put it at a 5. I wouldn't recommend it, but I could see people really enjoying just camping there if you're a low mid level looking to boss. And then we have Bandos in C tier. I put this above Zammy because I think it is just a lot more enjoyable to kind of camp. You can get a nice little duo team or trio team and stay in there for a good while. And yeah, the GP per hour is better than Zammy, and I just think all around it's better than Zammy. I know there are really sweaty methods for Zammy, but I don't know. Bandos is definitely better in my opinion. And then finally, the last C tier boss that in my opinion is probably a D or an F tier, but I'll put it up here because I know other people like it, and that is Sire. Boss fight enjoyability. Whenever I came here for the first 100 kills, 200 kills maybe, I was like, yeah, this is fun. Like the idea of it. Had a good time, so I'll give it a 6. GP per hour, also a 6. Pretty decent money for kind of that, I guess maybe even good money, you could argue, for people just getting to that point of Slayer, but I feel like most people probably aren't going to Sire for their money, so that's why I put it at a 6. And then campability, I put it at a 1. I absolutely hate Sire. After doing like one full Sire task, you'll realize that it probably isn't the way to go. It's like 10 to 15 hours depending on how many you get, and it's just tough, man. Some death sprinkled in there, just my goodness, it's hell. But I mean, you know, some people like that, so up to you. Now we're moving into the B tier bosses. First up, we have Kraken. Boss fight enjoyability, I put it at a 3. There's not too much going on, so I get that. GP per hour, also not great, but you're getting a decent bit, and you're getting Slayer XP too, so we'll give that a 4. And then campability, I think that's a 10. I mean, Kraken is one of the easiest bosses to camp. If you have a Sanguine Estus staff, you could just sit there all day and just keep going to town as long as you have the Slayer task. And a lot of people camp the pet here. It's quite a nice spot to camp for some XP and GP. Next up in B tier we have Callisto, a boss fight that honestly, I don't know. It's like with every other wildy boss. They can all be safe spotted, and in their unsafe spotted form, they're not that fun to kill. Callisto especially. So I gave him a 3 because he is tough to kill if not safe spotted. GP per hour, I'm assuming you know, you're either safe spotting or going with a group. I'll give it a 7. And then campability, also again assuming you're safe spotting, it makes it easy to kill. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it might not be the most fun fight, but if I can sit behind something and shoot the hell out of Callisto and get its drops, then that makes it easy to camp, right? I don't know. So I'll put that at an 8. Then we have kind of a controversial one, and that is Wintertot in B tier. This is just like the lowest level members boss that still gives you some stuff. It's not the most enjoyable fight, but you'll get some GP for those mid levels, and campability, I'll just put it at a 10. I mean, hardcore Ironman just come here and busted out all the way to 99, so it must be pretty easy to camp. You're getting almost meta XP from it too, so it's easy. And then next we have another skilling boss, which is Volcano. Boss fight enjoyability, I think all around this is just kind of a well-rounded boss. I enjoyed the boss fight. GP per hour, even after nerf, is still good and still worthwhile once you complete Song of the Elves. And campability, also pretty decent. I mean, you're not going to see too much that's too crazy that's going to entice you to camp here, but just getting a lot of kills out in a row doesn't seem to be too hard, and an overall decent fan is Volcano. Then next up we have Jad. This is obviously a weirder one since he has basically no drops other than the fire cape. Boss fight enjoyability, I put it at 10. I mean, Jad, I think, is one of the most classic RuneScape bosses, and just completing it for the first time, so rewarding that it's got to be a 10 in my book. GP per hour, this is, you know, where it gets hurt. It's obviously a 0, and campability is probably a 7. I mean, honestly, just looking for the pet and how good Slayer XP this is, gives you reason to come here, so I'll put that at a 7. Next up, we have Arma. This is one that I've done a little bit. I honestly kind of steer clear from because it's a bit too intense for me. Kind of meant for like the late game players to do real efficiently, but as far as boss fight enjoyability, it looks a bit tough, so I'm going to give it a 3. You know, maybe if you get it down, I could see liking it, but I don't know. Mostly the reason you would like it is due to the GP per hour, which I'm going to put it at 10. I mean, as far as God War's Dungeon goes, it's basically the best, so I just got to put it up there. And then campability, I'd say is like a 6. You know, it's obviously hard to camp in God War's Dungeon in general, but the money is going to entice you to stay. So next up we have Vorkath. This is kind of why I separated boss fight enjoyability and campability, because the first few times I came here, like Sire, I enjoyed it. I had a good time. I thought it kind of challenged me, and that was fun. GP per hour is a 9. It's really good meta GP for kind of med to high levels that are just, you know, just completing Dragon Slayer 2 and stuff like that. But the campability, man, once you start killing a lot of Vorkath and farming it, there's not a lot of variation in drops. It's just consistent consistent money. And while that is cool, I think long term it's not that fun. And the boss fight, there's only a couple things you have to pay attention for, and I don't know, it's just right in between being a focused boss and an AFK boss, because there are some aspects of it that are so easy that I just lose focus, and then there are other aspects of it that are quite intense and can kill me in one shot. So it's just tough. I'm not a big fan long term. Then we have Corp, a boss fight that I personally enjoy. I think there's nothing more fun than getting a couple of your homies together and going and killing some Corp. I mean, that is just classic. GP per hour, you know, I'll put it at 5. Maybe it's higher depending on what you're comparing it to. Depends on when you come here, of course. But the idea of the Ellie is so much better than the actual average drop of Corp, you know. You can think that you're getting an Ellie, but at the end of the day, you're probably just getting a lot of sadness and regular drops that add up to something, but you really do need to hit some of those big ones to make it big. And then finally in the B tier, I'm gonna put it here because it seems a bit tedious to kill, but it's Nightmare. I haven't done any of it, but I've been watching it, and I've seen that the prices of stuff has kind of dropped, so I don't know, GP per hour, we'll put it up there as like an 8 or 9. Obviously still good GP per hour. It's not meta anymore like it used to be when it came out. And then boss fight enjoyability and campability, I don't know. I can't really speak on those. If anything's going to be this late in the game, I mean, and make you this much money, it's going to be somewhere between A and B tier. Where that lies, I'm not quite sure. I haven't given it too much of a go. I've heard it can be a little tedious to camp long term, but I'm not quite certain. So we'll put it between A and B tier and let the people decide that for themselves. And now moving on to the A tier of this list. Yeah, not everything's depressing. People think I hate every boss, but that's just because we started with the bad ones. These are all the ones that I am all for in every regard. So the first one, probably my favorite, is Cerberus. Boss fight enjoyability, I put it an 8. It's just got enough mechanics that keep you pretty engaged almost the entire kill. And the GP per hour is great. I mean, I'm going to put it at 9. You get Slayer XP, you get that chance at a prim. It is good in spurts with the crystal drops, which is kind of what I like out of a boss and kind of why I didn't like Vorkath. So I put the campability at a 10 here. I find the rare drops to be so much more enticing as far as staying long term. Then next we have Hydra. The boss fight enjoyability here is probably a 4. I mean, it's literally just counting to 3 and running around. It's not crazy, it's a bit to learn, but I wouldn't say I enjoy that. GP per hour here is a 10, and honestly probably higher than a 10. Like, as soon as you unlock Hydra, it's probably your best money making method by a decent shot. So I do like that, but campability, I just can't put it that high because I don't enjoy it that much. So nice little 7 there. Then on to Venenatus. As far as the boss fight enjoyability, I'll put it at 5. Again, a wilderness boss you can save spot, so I don't know. It depends how you feel about that. GP per hour relative to where you're at, I think it's a 10. I mean, you can push 85 range early game and then stay here, and that's going to be, I mean, you could build your account on that, so I think that's great. And campability is probably an 8, a nice little mix of both. Might even be higher if you really do enjoy the safe spot like I do. I mean, maybe me, I'd say like a 9 or a 10. I could stay here forever, but other people I get might not want to. And then on to Raids 1 and Raids 2. We'll start with Chambers of Xerić. Boss fight enjoyability, my first time, I think they're both 10s. I think learning both forms of raids is just insanely enjoyable, so I'll give that a 10. GP per hour, I'll give an 8. I mean, it's good, but it's not going to be as good as obviously Theater, Hydra, maybe if you're doing Arma at a great level. I don't know. I'm kind of comparing it more to late game, but as soon as you unlock Chambers, it can be really good again. And campability, I don't know. Personally, I'm going to put it a little bit lower. I've just done so much Chambers at this point that there's not as much that keeps me engaged. There's not as much chance of death. Some of the rooms are just kind of, you know, could go to sleep during. So I enjoy most of it. I think Ulm's insanely fun, but there are some rooms that I find a bit boring. And then Theater of Blood, this one's actually one that I do enjoy quite a lot, and yeah, you can see that by the ratings. I gave it a 10. I think just learning Theater, while it is quite a struggle, is, you know, so rewarding and so enjoyable at the end of it all that it's definitely a 10 in my book. GP per hour used to be a 10, probably closer to a 9 at this point with the price of sites and where they're at. So not going to be meta, but still very good. Depending on how you do it, could be meta money, you know, if you're doing duos or like trios, but I'm not that crazy right now, so I'm not going to put it as a 10. And then campability, I think honestly it's pretty fun to camp Theater, because every raid, you know, there's a chance that you could screw it and just mess up for your entire team. So you're always kind of just trying to do good for everyone, and it makes it pretty enjoyable, you know, it's just a big old team effort. And then we have DKs, Dagonoth Kings, honestly a boss fight that I find pretty enjoyable. Basically just go between killing all three of them, running around, switching gears, switching prayers. It's nice to be able to test out some of your abilities. And GP per hour, it depends where you're at. Earlier on, of course, it's going to be better, but later game, it's going to be worse. So it averages out to probably a 7 as far as GP wise. Decent drops, and of course, way better if you have the Fremenic Elites done. And then camp ability, I'll give this an 8. It's fun, honestly, to go to Dagonoth Kings and see how long you can last and try to beat your PRs in terms of Dagonoth King kills per trip, so I find that pretty fun for camping. Then our final God Wars dungeon boss, and that is Sarah. This is an A tier because I think with the Twisted Bow, it's enjoyable. I'll put it as 6 as far as boss fight enjoyability. The camp ability, probably a 7, and the GP per hour is a 9. And I think the boss fight enjoyability and the camp ability are a bit low there. I think that's heavily dependent on the T-bow, and I don't know. I can't say the boss fight is that enjoyable when it's literally just running around a room. Compared to how much you have to sweat with the other God Wars dungeon bosses, I think it's kind of nice to be able to just have something a bit more chill, so I don't have to bank every 2 kills. And then finally, to end off this entire list, we have Zulrah. Just the classic moneymaker. Honestly, I like it better than Vorkath, so I put it into A tier. I made that leap. I think that, you know, learning it obviously is difficult, but much like Theater of Blood, once you have it down, it is going to make you good money, and it's going to be fun to kill. Always something new. I mean, 4 rotations to go between. You're never prepared for what's coming, so I think the boss fight's enjoyable to get learning. I think long-term camping it, the fact that you have kind of some rare drops that are 4 to 5 mil, and you also have a variation in rotations, I think that makes it pretty enjoyable to camp, and along with a good meta GP per hour for med to high level PVMers, I just think it's a through and through A tier to end off the list. So yeah, that is going to be it as far as my opinions on all of the bosses in Old School RuneScape. I actually did miss a couple. There's the Gauntlet, which I've never personally tried, and Zuck as well, which both of those are a bit strange for their own reasons. I mean, Gauntlet's kind of like dungeoneering, and Zuck is obviously just a different level than where I'm at currently, so can't really speak on those. Decent late game bosses, of course, but I don't want to speak on something I can't. So if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like. Anything you want to tell me, let me know in a comment down below. And on top of that, if you want to see more videos like this as soon as they go live, make sure to hit that subscribe. And with that said, hopefully you guys have a wonderful day, and see you.